just to welcome everybody to this webinar in the scope of the Lifelong Learning Week. Okay, this webinar focused on well-being and media literacy for parents. Thank you to Margaret for being with us today. Thank you for accepting the invitation of being with us today. I leave the screen to Aria, who will moderate the webinar. So please, Aria.
Thank you, Victor. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Margaret Korozek from the University of Derby and Yasu Kotera, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who will talk about well-being in the digital sphere and their understanding and what they can recommend maybe to parents. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Sorry, I just have a little bit of a dog situation all of a sudden, of course. So apologies. I would like to just, I know Yasu is a bit shorter on time, so I would prefer to pass this to Yasu. He has experience as a parent and does research in wellness as well. So that would be the best to transfer right now.
Okay, yes. So I'm father of triplets and a plus one. So yeah, three babies. They are 2 years old, and two of them have developmental delays and also disabilities. So yeah, my wife's life in the past 2 years have been very sometimes difficult. And so I can talk a lot about wellness in child raising, and also my research focuses on mental health. So I've been learning a lot about mental health, and what I found helpful for mental health recently is that self-compassion. Probably, some of you might have heard of this concept of self-compassion. It means that kindness towards yourself. And this is very important. And then when now we have access to lots of digital things and the messages can come in instantly, or you can do many things instantly. And some people develop a sense of self-criticism, which is the opposite of self-compassion, that you feel like you could do more, but you can't do, or you tend to compare with others, which is not really good for your mental health. So during those kind of times, there are so many factors that could worsen self-criticism, but having this mind of self-compassion, kindness towards yourself is very helpful. And one step to do that may be that, thinking back about a compassionate person towards yourself, someone that you feel compassion from, that would be very helpful. For example, in your life history, the teacher from elementary school or your family members who may have good compassionate view towards yourself, and then think about what these people may say about your difficult situations. These kind of things are often helpful. And then another thing that's very popular among my students is simple breathing, self-care breathing almost, that in the busy life, when stress is high, our breathing changes. Our breathing gets to be shallow. And then in my therapeutic practices, I practice in UK and also I practice in San Francisco, that we learn that what we get in life is a byproduct of how we breathe. So these therapists say that how we breathe is really, really important. And then just by slowing things down and breathing slowly can help you to get rid of the spiral of self-criticism and stay more neutral. Or by breathing more, you can probably be aware of a compassionate mind that you have towards yourself. So yeah, breathing is another helpful tool. And then yeah, in my child raising experiences, that the breathing has been very helpful. Like when one baby is crying and attend to it, and then baby next to him poops and needs diaper change immediately, and there's a girl who wants her nose wiped, kind of thing, that often easily my mind goes panic mode, but having this breathing exercise teaches me how to stay on the ground and then keeps it going. And so, yeah, I think this mind of self-compassion, I think in parenting, some people, feel this negative view towards themselves, or feeling guilt, or feeling wonder if they are doing what they can do kind of moment. But that may function as doing more or improving, but that it's often that self-compassion, kindness towards themselves is ignored. And through my research, exploring different populations, like Dutch workers, German workers, South African workers, or South African people, and UK people, Japanese people, across and in different sectors like students, workers, and across. Self-compassion has been strongly linked to good mental health. So that's probably that most relevant thing, and probably that maybe that fits the purpose of this meeting today, that the self-compassion would be probably very helpful. And there's no shame, there's no guilt of practicing self-compassion. That as Dalai Lama said, that you need to take care of yourself first in order to offer care for others. So I think that's probably my main message. Margaret, is that?
Yasu, yeah, if I can just ask you, if you just have this moment more, we are both in an online learning scenario where we intentionally design online learning. And so I'd just be curious if you could share any tips from an online learning perspective of how wellness is embedded in the design and how we support students at a distance.
Thank you. That's a very good question. That during COVID time, obviously that's mental health of students, and then we teach professional healthcare students. So they are all registered nurses or social workers or counselors coming to study online, and then they become very busy, even more. And to support their mental health, we have embedded a couple of exercises such as resilience discussion. This is where we focus on resilient moment in their life, and as we talk more, they can feel more of resilience. That's one exercise. And then relating to that, I think in online learning, consistently what we value is intrinsic motivation, meaning fun. Fun is probably easy word to say about intrinsic motivation. And this again, through my research in motivation studies, intrinsic motivation leads to better mental health and better ethical judgment on as opposed to extrinsic motivation, where you work or you study in order to get money or fame, external things. Your mental health suffers, and also your ethical judgment suffers. So those probably two pieces, that supporting resilience and also nurturing intrinsic motivation, are probably key for well-being in learning.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Yasu, I'm not sure your timing though, so please keep us posted.
Probably, yeah. I should go. I think I saw my wife's head popping up there, so I'm gonna pick up her place. Very sorry, I have to leave this short time, but yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I think it's meaningful to have met you in this 15 minutes. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Yasu.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed for having taken the time. Actually, we have an assistant who is a mother of a triplet, and I have.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and they are 7 years old now. But I still remember when they were little, we were helping out, all our friends were helping out to, because you're always missing one pair of hands, right? You have three of them. So I totally feel with you with the triplets, but they're wonderful now that they are 7 and they are going to school. And so
that's great.
All my encouragements, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll see you later. Bye.
So that, yes, just for context, if I could add to that, because that was a bit of a quick whistle stop tour. Yasu, is at the University of Derby, focuses on the some of our online degree programs, and also is one of the top researchers in the area as well of wellness and compassion therapies and things. So really interesting focus. And I just wanted to give a context, though, from the University of Derby perspective. So University of Derby is based in the UK. You can hear maybe from my voice, I'm not British, but so we have yet another country to add to our diverse group today here from the US. But University of Derby has a history, about 10 years of online programs specifically. And I say that because when we're talking about digital literacy and we're talking about wellness in an online space, I think there is a distinct difference between intentionally designed online learning and learning that is a response, for example, last year to being in a lockdown situation, especially for our young people. When learning is available online, you know, if you just kind of take a school schedule and say, well, this class is going to be online and this one, you know, you're already testing the limits of well-being if the student, who might be a young child, you know, is expected to just be online all day long, going from virtual room to virtual room. So that intentional design from a holistic institution perspective is absolutely critical. And I think that's the part that I would, you know, that is certainly up for discussion. I'd be really curious as well to see how, you know, what your experience has been with that shift, because some institutions, local schools, or you know, regional education entities may have a specific approach to that, and others may not. So maybe just open the floor to that one, Ari. I'm not sure if or other questions that you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Margaret, for opening that discussion. Actually, in our project, the Media Literacy for Parents, we also try to focus a bit on the opportunities that online learning offers, but of course, always under the aspect of guarding the well-being of the learner. And as you said, with the COVID situation, that was a change that happened basically overnight. And nobody was really prepared. I mean, very few schools, very few countries. And I said this morning at another meeting, there's a lot of diversity in how schools and how different countries went about this whole thing. But well-being was not really on the agenda. It was just on how can we make the schooling work if we cannot meet in presence any longer. And only with time, people started understanding that, all right, if this is what we are going to do, not only for a week or 2 weeks, but maybe on a longer term, we need to consider other aspects. We need to organize this differently. And we know from the studies that exist now that have come out in 2020 that mental health of students has really suffered, and that we have seen an enormous rise in these issues in the psychiatric hospitals, psychologists, clinics, and so on. So I think that now many people are aware of the problem, and we are curious to hear from our participants actually what their experiences are and how their countries have coped. And then I'm going to present to you a little later our project and what it might how it might help to ease that tension and that problem. So I would, as we are not that many people, I think you can just either raise your hand. There's a little button on the bottom of your screen that says reactions, where you can raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself and talk. Please, go ahead. Yes, I can see a hand raised here. It's guest, so I don't know who that really is.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Selena.
Okay, please go ahead, Elena.
No, I just raised my hand so that someone can see and change. I cannot rename the guest. So
okay.
I said I will raise
you
my
have.
Okay, all right, I have it. Thank you.
Has managed. Okay, so it was just for that. You didn't want to contribute? So maybe
No,
somebody
no.
else would like to say something.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone. And thank you for the speakers for what they have been said. Here in Portugal, we face with surprise to be all the classrooms and all the learning in online content. And the teachers are not prepared for it, the parents either, and the students either. And I think the question of well-being was not so important on that time, because as the last speaker said, we are most concerned about if they learn the content that the curricula is structured. And I think that in this context and in this year, this concern arise from the number of students that get depressive problems and even parent issues. And we have to look on it and try to understand how we can help, how we can use the online technology to the learning contest, but how we can ensure that those activities on online contests, they fulfill the well-being aspects, and they measure the impact that they have on children, mostly on young people, because we see that students on university level here in Portugal, we get back for the face-to-face learning. In spite of, in my modest opinion, I think that in a huge level, like university level, we can think on the online learning has an opportunity to facilitate the students living, the students, how can I say, the other things that we are enrolled in our society, and we can still learn, and we have the benefits of it, but we have disadvantages also, and we understand that. That's why in the low level, on young learners level, we have to think on well-being, and we have many problems related with depressive things, and children that need the face-to-face presence to understand and to learn emotional skills, because they are growing up and they don't have the background as a adult learner have, and this is the main concern that I think we have to put on the table. And also the aspect of emotional skills, how we can ensure that using online technology, we don't put apart the emotional skills that we need to live on society. I'm sorry to be too long this comment.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I think you raised a very important point. How can you do emotional learning and in an online context? And I don't know whether you all saw the comment that Margaret already put in the chat, but I would like to give you the floor to explain maybe a little more what it means to have intentional learning design, and how this can be done, how teachers can be trained to know how to do this, because from the experience that I think we all had, especially in the first lockdown, because it happened overnight, most of the teachers just grabbed whatever was at hand, the nearest platform that they had some idea about. Sometimes it was just by emails that they communicated with their students, or even in a WhatsApp group. And for, I had just in the meeting that I had this morning in my presentation, I put forward some of the parents' voices who had said, well, it was so confusing because the math teacher used emails, the physics teacher had a platform, the English teacher sent tasks by WhatsApp group or Facebook group. And if you had 2 or 3 children, for parents, it was almost impossible to keep track of where homework or where tasks came in, what they had to do, how they had to do it. And for many families, that was a huge, huge challenge. On top of that, many teachers were so afraid that children would fall back in their academic learning that they really put out too many tasks, too many things to look at, to read, to exercises to do, and so on, that children were staying at their screen for like 10 hours because they had the class in the morning and then they were doing all the other things in the afternoon still. And for parents who had very strict screen rules, yeah, it was like a nightmare. So please.
Thank you. So yes, the intentional learning design is really, you know, you've got resources, you have activities, and you have, you know, how are you transitioning between those things? So if you think about from a learning and teaching context, you know, you have certain objectives you need to match, you need to prepare for an assessment, you know, and there's specific objectives for that. So there is very core information that you need to cover with students, with teachers, you know, in this kind of dance between the teachers and the students. In an online space, and I'm speaking more from a higher education perspective, but there are many online schools, secondary schools, and other, you know, younger children focused areas where you still have this requirement, where you have material that is presented, but it's what is an individual, what is the learner doing with that material? What is the activity that they will do to deepen their understanding, to deepen their knowledge? So you think, you know, reading is one thing, but what happens? What are we asking the learner or the student to do with that learning? That's very much on the pedagogic side of the material, of the resources. The part that supports that is knowing that there's a community there, knowing that other students or learners are in that space. How is an individual student interacting with those other students in this virtual space? Is there a space for them to go as well? Is there a space for them to meet in a virtual space with or without the teacher, potentially, depending on the age? But having that space to communicate with your peers is another part. And again, you know, dependent on the age that we're talking about. But I think that's really important. And what the colleague before said about, you know, one teacher sending emails, one teacher sending WhatsApp, this is absolutely fundamental. So think about this. Every day, hopefully, you can go to the store and you know where your bread is, you know where your milk is, and you go in and you get your things because you know how to navigate your shop. Your local shop is your safe space, right? You know where things are. Imagine every single day, the shopkeeper changes all the shelves around. What happens? You walk in and you're like, you know, panic almost. Where is the bread? Oh my gosh, I can't find it. You know, oh, it's at the very bottom shelf. You know, oh, it's on the top shelf. That is like, you know, your sense of safety, your sense of your psychological load, you know, the cognitive load escalates like crazy because you have to think about where to go. That's not learning. That's using your brain to navigate. It's not using your brain to learn the material. So online space, the navigation and the consistency across different parts, it's really important to be consistent. And I think as a school or as an institution, That's why we talk about a virtual learning environment. That's why we talk about specific tools that can be used to create community, to share resources, to have a discussion board, to meet with your peers. That's why there's a high value in having consistency in that space. So yeah, the navigation is absolutely critical. And if it's left to an individual teacher, while I don't have a problem with that in general, it's not necessarily serving the student, and we need to serve our students. So yeah, absolutely cannot emphasize that enough.
Well, thank you very much. I think the idea of serving the student has not trickled down so very much yet, at least in the context that I know. I don't know if anybody else has any different experience that they would like to share with us. I really like the idea of navigation and consistency, but I also think that there was nothing of all that, at least not in the beginning of the pandemic. I have the impression that it got a bit better with every lockdown, but I don't think we should be practicing lockdowns, frankly. I mean, we are in our fourth one here in Austria, and I don't think it's an ideal situation. But please feel free to unmute yourself and comment.
I understand what Margaret said, and make me remind about instructional design, where we design the steps that a learner have to fulfill to complete a task, and when they know where to find activities, where they have to find the references, and how they can discuss some topic with the students. And we start sometimes to have a forum with a coffee forum where people can share other things that are not related with the topic and with the content. But in online contest, we have also to think about the online disinhibition effect. Because in online contest, we don't feel the presence of the other person, and sometimes we express ourselves with some words that in a face-to-face contest, we measure the words that we use to talk with each other. I understand what Margaret said, that we have to establish a community on online contest, but I think the key and the answer will be the blended learning and not only online learning. And in my modest opinion, I think that the e-learning and online learning have to be a target for adult learner contest and not for the younger contest, because as I said before, we are dealing with children that they are growing up, they are trying to learn how to be on society, and we have to be aware of this because they have to understand that we have the responsibilities as citizens, and sometimes we have to feel what the other person don't say, but we understand that during the circumstances they are not prepared for something, and we understand in touch and not only online presence, because we have this situation, and many studies talk about the online disinhibition effect, and we have to prepare in order to avoid cyberbullying, grooming, and stuff like that, and don't raise children that don't have the sensibility to understand the others. That's why I said before about the emotional skills that we have to be in account when we talk about the online learning environment and instructional design and learning online. We have to have these in consideration. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk.
Well, thank you very much. We will talk about a little bit about all these dangers also in a minute. But because the dangers are very often in the foreground, I also wanted to have Margaret speak a little bit of how this could be done in a positive way. I think it's very important because now that we have been in this for quite some time, yes, we do see the negative effects, and we need to mitigate those. But I think let's not forget that digitalization is here to stay, and that we will need to handle this also in the future, and also to make our children fit for the future and future jobs. Just this morning at the meeting also, it came back from the European Commission that about 90% of jobs will require some kind of digital skills in the future. So it is not something that we can do totally without. But I also think that emotional skills are very important, and the session we had here on Monday yesterday during the Lifelong Learning Week also dealt with how can you teach things like computational thinking, binary code, and so on, without using digital devices. Yeah. So in an offline world, you can actually learn a lot of things that you need for the online world. And what you just mentioned about the blended learning, that will certainly be, I believe, at least the way into the future. But I'm sure Margaret has more information about that than I do, because she's at the source of the research.
So yeah, thank you so much. And yes, first of all, online learning is not for everyone. Online learning in the context where I work within a higher education, those learners, those students generally would not have otherwise had the opportunity to complete a university degree by coming onto campus. So the profile or the demographic of that audience is very different. In other words, for them, online learning is the only option. Okay, so that is the distinct difference that I absolutely want to make clear. So I absolutely don't have the mantra that online learning is the only way to go, and we should, you know, not have any campuses anymore or schools anymore. So that's absolutely not the case. Online serves a certain audience to those who may not otherwise. And because of that, we have a responsibility to not give them a subpar experience. So the positive side of online is that we must provide all of the virtual campus or the virtual school resources to all students, regardless if it's blended or on campus or fully online. And so blended learning, absolutely, we see you know, that's where we are right now. We're in that blended learning space where schools and higher education institutions are all balancing a bit of, are you on campus for this, and a little bit of, you know, you do some bits at home. The distinction from that, and because blended learning itself, you know, doesn't have an agreed definition. What is blended learning? And we'll all say something potentially different. The distinction that I like to offer is what is synchronous, what is right now we are synchronous, and what is asynchronous, what is done independently as a learner. And that crosses regardless of the age of the learner. Small children, secondary schools, further education, apprenticeships, higher degrees. What is a learner required to do independently, asynchronously? And where are they expected to be present in a synchronous environment where the teacher or their peers, other students, are in the same place at the same time? Because that is part of the design. How are you designing it? And that's also where you can find the space so that you are balancing that screen time, right? Especially for the younger children. And also, just as a side comment, online degrees in the UK and other places tend to be part-time. These are working adults right? These are not full-time degrees. You're not there 8 hours a day on the screen reading. You know, that's not the design of it either. So that personal one-to-one and just social skills, totally and completely agree. And that is definitely hard to replicate. We need that human touch. We need that engagement with others. We need to understand our place in the world. And oftentimes that is through engaging with others. And so a sense of community in a face-to-face perspective is critical. So it's really more when we have to do online, or when we have to be in that space, when that's the only option, we must serve those students. We must serve them and not compromise their experience. They must have an equivalent experience and access equivalent resources that someone in a face-to-face environment would also experience. So yeah, appreciate the perspective, but I do think there's so much. Online opens up an opportunity. It's, you know, and the design of it is where we have that transferability to other spaces, to the blended space. And that's, I mean, I love online learning. And why do I love it? Because it opens up the door to someone who may not have otherwise had that opportunity. That completely motivates me. And to know that I have got to serve that audience, you know, because they wouldn't be in the classroom otherwise. They wouldn't have that chance. And our schools have seen that as well. They didn't have the chance to go into school. We had to serve our students, our young people, in a virtual way. And it was a challenge, as we know. But I think the positives are, yes, you take away learning how to engage in a digital space. You learn those skills. There are always risks, and that's what, you know, that's the research that's here too. But the positive is there, you know, our young people have learned to engage in different ways, in new ways, to use the technology, to use their devices in a constructive way. These are transferable, and these will be required in the job market. So it's an opportunity as well. You know, we need to be protective and we need to be concerned about some of these things, but we also can look at, wow, what a gift as well. We've just propelled, you know, some of this skills in the digital space with the students we have right now.
Well, thank you very much, Margaret. My grandmother used to say, there's always two sides to every medal, and there are always inconvenience and advantages. And I think we need to harness the opportunities and make the best out of them, and try to mitigate the inconvenience as far as possible, especially when it comes to our children. Yeah? And of course, the reactions also from parents were very different according to the experiences they had, and that differed a lot depending on the age of the children, the kind of school they went to, how well the school was prepared, and so on and so forth. So there's no one size fits all, definitely, and we don't want that. We have all learned, I think, that schools are not only a place of academic learning, and I think that was pointed out very nicely by Rute. They are a place of social learning as well, and that is an aspect that gets lost very often in the virtual space. And that's why it's also so important that the schools keep open. Yeah? I mean, we have been fighting in Austria now for this 4th lockdown to keep the schools going with a lot of confusion and hassle and so on. But the interesting thing was that the interviews that were done by journalists in the weekend before the lockdown happened with children in the streets, children, youngsters, teenagers, all ages, and they could not find, I mean, through all the TV channels and all the radio channels, they could not find one child that said, I don't want to go to school on Monday. So they've all been through 3 lockdowns and periods where they had to learn from home and so on. And they just don't want to do this any longer. Yeah, not on a permanent level. I mean, nobody, I think, is against doing things via screen, learning and experiencing digital materials. But the fact that they were not able to meet with their friends in school and exchange and have all these social aspects I think that was dearly missing, and this is why young people want to go to school. Yeah. So thank you very much for all this insight. I would like to briefly now present you the Media Literacy for Parents project that EPA has been engaged, and that it is in its final stages. We're currently translating the last part of it, and I hope I can share my screen. Let me see whether this works. Yes, it should. Oops. Yeah. Yes. Oops. And two. Up. Yes. Up. No. No. Yes. Here we go. No, this is not the page that I wanted. Here. Okay, so the Media Literacy for Parents project started in 2019. To be very exact, it started in November 2019, when probably nobody knew that Corona lurked around the corner, and that it would probably be the most timely project that EPA has ever done. You can see in the bottom line the partners that are from 6 different countries, including Cyprus, Greece, Bulgaria, Italy, and we are here considered as a Belgian organization, and then the project leader that is from Poland. So that was the background that was established, and I recall it was before Corona was here. It was talking about how the digitalization was already transforming schools and working places and basically people's life before the pandemic. But of course, that became even more important than when everything had to be passed online. So here are again our partners in the project. And our goals in the project were to develop a training program that aims at enhancing parents' media literacy skills and competencies, to assist parents in protecting their children from the dangers that they may face online, to promote the development of open and free educational resources. I think this is what we have very clearly been talking about. I'm sorry, but I have to attend the door for a moment, but maybe Victor, you can go on and explain this other parts of the project at the moment. Just a moment, please. Okay. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Yeah, we're having some family issues here. So let me just go on and say, you have all read in the meantime the slide, so I can go on to the next one. So the training program that has been developed and that has actually already been piloted in different countries reflects on the one hand the dangers that we identified as major dangers that need to be that parents need to be aware of, but also the opportunities. And actually, when we drew up the list, we saw that opportunities always lag a little bit behind. So that's why I wanted to insist on these opportunities also today in this webinar. We also developed a web app. The web app is accessible through the website of the project, and it's a digital web application that has a pool of more than 400 activities regarding media literacy that parents can either do themselves or with their children as a family, and they are available in the partners' languages. And I invite you at the end of the presentation, you will have the link to the website to sign up and to try these activities out with your children. And then the final part is a parent's guide to media literacy. That is a handbook. It comprises at the moment almost more than 100 pages, and it is being translated in this as we speak during into the partners' languages of the project, and will also be made available through the website of the project, but there will also be some printed copies at our next meeting that we hopefully will hold in France. So let me talk a little bit more about this guide. So I give you a glimpse of what it looks like from the outside, and how the chapters inside are organized. There's a general overview on media literacy, and then there's an introduction, of course. There's also a glossary with the most important expressions, because very often you find expressions like media literacy, information literacy, digital literacy. So to make understand what we mean when we talk about these different, when we use these different expressions. Then we have the thematic sections, as I said, on dangers, on opportunities, and also on prevention, because we believe that prevention is actually one of the most important aspects of the media literacy. Then there's a sector that tells you how to use the web app, and then another sector about joining the community, because in the partners countries, each partner in the project has created a Facebook group where people who would like to exchange further, even after having completed the training course or having read the guide, would like to come together and exchange good practices, but also talk about challenges that they might have encountered. So this would be something that is on offer. Of course, we cannot offer it in all the languages. We only have it in the languages of the partners in this consortium. But I think it's also an idea that could be adopted by other parents' associations in other countries to run a specific Facebook group or another social media group, depending on what in your country is the most used social media channel. We have learned also during our project that differs greatly from north to south and east to west. Some people use a lot of Facebook, some others are more at home in WhatsApp groups or in Telegram or Viber. So there are different ways of how to do this, and there's an invitation out there. So do feel free to create something like that. And use the material that is available on our website for dissemination. So in the glossary, you will find popular buzzwords and scientific terms as we understand them. In the overview, you have the different aspects of media parenting styles and communication styles, family management, and role models and stereotypes. Then in the thematic areas, as I said, dangers, opportunities, and prevention, and the web app and the community. So what are the topics in, for instance, the dangers? We talk about cyberbullying, sexting, grooming, sextortion. There's a mistake there, sorry. Misdis and malinformation, hate speech, internet addiction, online gaming and online games, social media, and others. Oops. So in the prevention sector, we talk a lot about cybersecurity, online privacy, and also parental control tools. In the pilotings that we have held, we saw that especially the parental control tools were met with huge interest. We always say that the parental control tools are not the only way how to keep your children safe, especially as children grow older. They find their ways on how to go around those parental control tools. So the most important thing, and we come back here to what has been described today as the emotional skills. So communication with your children is really a key point. Don't install things on your child's device without telling them about it. When children get older, you might want to negotiate also what kind of controls are there. They will also not want to get into any kind of violent games or violent experiences on the net. So you might well explain why you want to install a tool that helps them to prevent these kind of experiences. So we encourage that you don't do that in a hidden way, but that you have an open talk about this, and that you also in the media management in your family, you talk about what the children think they need, why they think that they need it, and then come to a common agreement. We also recommend that this agreement be a written agreement that you maybe hang up in your kitchen or somewhere where you can always go back to it and can say, well, we agreed and you signed and I signed this agreement, so you were aware of what we agreed upon. So as a preventive measure before getting into trouble. The opportunities, I mean, we have talked this today with Margaret and Yasu, thankfully, about the opportunities that are also there. The online learning, that is a big part of it, but also the fact of keeping in touch. I mean, many of you during the COVID crisis now probably use those online tools to keep in touch with families and friends. Access to information goes without saying. Participation also, I mean, we have seen also due to COVID a lot of wonderful events being all of a sudden online, wonderful theater performances, concerts, etc., but also, of course, social engagement, political action, democratic developments. I mean, if you think about all the consultations that are held by the European Commission, where you can participate online and have your say, these are wonderful opportunities of the online world. Also creating content. I know that young people very often are much better at that than we are, creating videos, podcasts, also publishing articles, sharing experiences. And here again, this is where the dangers and the opportunities I think meet, is how to make them understand what can be posted, in which way, the netiquette that plays a huge role, the respect to others, that you have to ask for consent before posting somebody's picture or a video, and so on and so forth. I think that is an opportunity, but it's also an opportunity to learn how to navigate, as Margaret already pointed out, to navigate this online space. I loved, by the way, your comparison with the supermarket, where you you expect to find things always in the same place. It has happened to me on several occasions that I went in there and they had rearranged everything, and I was really, really upset about it. And a friend of mine then said, you know, routine is bad for your memory, and you should take it as an Alzheimer prevention. So now every time I go to the supermarket and they have changed everything, I'm still angry, but I try to see it from this positive angle, and it does help, it does. So here is the website. I invite you to discover all the great tools that we are publishing on the website, and also follow us on Facebook, the social media, and you can sign up for our newsletter. And of course, we will keep you informed about webinars and multiply events. There will be one held, hopefully in presence, in Brussels at the end of January. Yeah, we are planning that, and we hope that it can take place as we as we have agreed and as we have foreseen. So if there are any questions, comments, please let us know. Silence in the audience. Then I would like to come back to Margaret and ask her. I mean, she has had an overview over this.
I'm sorry. We can
yes.
find this app on the Google Store.
You can find the app if you go onto the website, onto the Mealy website. In the upper right-hand corner, you will find a button to register. And if you register there, you will get access to the web app.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for the presentation.
Well, you're most welcome. Any other questions, suggestions, proposals? No? Well, then I would get back to Margaret and ask you, do you know about any other tools for parents that you could recommend? What you would say this would be a really helpful tool to look at if you want to enhance your child's online learning?
Thank you. Oops, unmute myself. Yeah. So there are several resources. The Center for Humane Technology, I'll put a link in the chat, is, well, this is just one part of it, but if you look at the Center for Humane Technology has a few toolkits that are aimed at youth toolkits. It says on the website, everyone who uses social media deserves to know how it works. So there are some resources there for students and parents, and I would highly recommend that as a credible, and very good resource. Another one is, oh, I've just sent that message, sorry, to Claudia only. Sorry, I'll put it in the chat in a minute. Is Common Sense Media. Is also a very good resource. Again, I'll put that in the chat in a moment, where there are resources for parents and students alike. And many of these resources are used in schools, as part of a digital literacy, media literacy class, and just bringing awareness to students and young people about the risks. But I think, as you say, Aria, it's also about the opportunities, right? I think if we frame everything as this is actually really bad and you have to be careful, we do, no question, we must absolutely be very careful, but we also have an opportunity to show how and model how to use media in a very positive way and how it can support learning and education. So I think there is a balance in the narrative that we as educators and as parents ourselves potentially, how are we using the language around this? And are we creating fear only, or are we also, considering the opportunities that it also affords? So I think there's some narrative there that, we could explore. I just am reading a question there about, Victor, your question here about do I have any experience with a hybrid approach, combining online learning and in-person experiential activities? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I used to teach in secondary education as well, and I don't teach in higher education right now. I'm more on the design and production side, but I was in the classroom, in secondary education. And I think it is about, again, back to that synchronous and asynchronous distinction. What is it that we would want to ask? What is critical from a social perspective that we engage synchronously together? Where's the value in having that synchronous opportunity to convene, right? To meet and see people's responses and have the ability to ask questions live. Now, things like that might be recorded and they might be available, later. But what, where is the value in that? And in contrast, from a, let's say, a flipped classroom perspective, where is there value in just that individual reflective time, where it's independent, it's independent learning, it's independent preparation for that synchronous opportunity. So I think it's really going through your course as a whole and identifying that in online learning. If we have a new program, it's going online, nothing exists, and it's starting from scratch, we will have a high-level plan workshop. What's that? We will come together with the program owners and with all of the academics who are teaching, and we will sit down and we'll map out the entire program, each module, each class, and essentially decide. It's creating a blueprint. And that is that intentional design, right? That is where you say, this thing right here needs to be live, synchronous, or this aspect or this resource, that can be an independent learning opportunity. And when it's, when you're responsive because you have to do it, it's possible to miss some of those nuances of where things are best served, of where things are best received, right? How can they be best received by the student, by the learner? So hybrid needs that design just as much as the classroom needs, just as much as fully online needs. It's not enough to just say, well, some is going to be offline or blended and some is going to be online. It still needs that intentional design.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Margaret. I mean, I think this holistic approach is absolutely crucial, and to put the learner in the center of our attention when creating such an environment. I think that is the crucial point. And that's not always easy, especially for teachers who have never done this before. They've also grown up in a teacher-centered way of teaching themselves. So to make that shift already for themselves, even in a sort of normal environment, is not always easy. And then to do that or to transfer that to an online space or a blended space is even more difficult. I mean, when we talk about hybrid, I think that many people understand that some children are in class and some children are at home, and teachers need to cater for both groups, which is an additional challenge for many of them. And very often we see that they say, okay, then we do only an online class because I can't handle that situation. Yeah, it's also a question of training of how I go about this, how I do this. And I think that that will still require quite some time also in training for many people.
Yeah, you mentioned something that just I want to follow up with there, and that is the training for teachers and the need for experiential induction. If they themselves have not experienced hybrid learning or blended learning or fully online learning, they're not standing in an authentic space, let's say. Now, this is now moving on from the response, which I will not put any blame on anyone for responding in the way they were able to best. Teachers will always want to serve their students in the best way that they know. But the question is, how can we support teachers to experience that type of learning? If we're expecting them to teach in an online or hybrid or blended space, yet we're not providing that opportunity for them to learn themselves in that space, we're doing our teachers a disservice.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think you might have seen that there are comments in the chat saying that Of course, it is difficult if the infrastructure is not there. Yeah, that was one of the biggest issues at the beginning of the pandemic, I think, specifically because there were huge gaps in who had a device, which kind of device, and did you have enough bandwidth to access the internet. That was not the case for many families. A lot of countries have then started to invest and to hand out devices to students, either borrowing them from the school or rolling out a different program where devices were bought on the level of the ministry or other authorities and then handed out to the students. But still the internet connection or bad internet connection problem remained, especially if you have several people in a family who need to access the internet at the same time. Yeah, I mean, we tend to think that this is only true for vulnerable groups, but there were very middle-class families that found themselves all at home. And all of a sudden they found out that the family computer and maybe the tablet they had were not enough, because there were two parents supposed to telework and two children that were supposed to follow online learning. And all of a sudden there was a gap, because they just did not have enough technology to do that. Yeah? And then it's a question of priorities. Can father use the computer because he has an important video conference? Well, then the children can't go to school. I mean, there were families confronted with questions that they had never, I mean, not even by far contemplated before. Yeah. And also the bandwidth, you know, when they then finally purchased the 2 additional computers and they all connected to the internet, the connection fell flat. So these were things that lots of people were confronted with. And I think gradually, as I said, we have been going from one lockdown to the next. So people have improved, they have purchased more devices, they have gotten better internet connections if they have the financial means. Because here we have an economic gap between those who could afford doing all this and those who were just not able to do that. Maybe somebody who lost his or her job due to the pandemic, yeah, and would really struggle to make ends meet, and then be asked to invest also in better digital devices would just be out of the question. So we really have to, and that's why as a parent association, we have really pleaded for keeping the schools open, yeah, because these kind of discrepancies always hit the most vulnerable first, but then go through society as a whole and make more damage than actually maybe a corona case in a class. Especially if you have if you manage to establish the school as a sort of safe place with testing and masks and so on. Yeah. So we really need to be, I think, very careful about when we say, okay, well, there's a pandemic and we close the schools. Yeah, this is really an issue. Maybe some other comments. I see that there's a lot of there are a lot of things in the chat on the digital divide and digital literacy. The boundaries of education and school have been crossed by this new social issue. Yeah, and society is far from solving this great issue. Absolutely. Yeah. I think all the ministries are struggling, trying their best to bridge that gap. But I'm afraid that we will have to invest more in education and also in digitalization. And there are tools out there. Yeah, I mean, the European Commission has this digital education action plan. The countries have been asked to submit plans so that they can draw on the funds for that. We also have the new DITCOMP, so Digital Competence Framework 2.2 coming up, that has been overhauled from the 2.0 version. And that is a very interesting document. I've been at a meeting yesterday where this was presented by people who were involved in the creating of that document, and that also pleads for a balance between digital and so online and offline, but also has quite a number of interesting new points in it, influenced evidently also by the pandemic. Maybe Margaret, you were probably involved also with these documents. Maybe you would like to share your point of view on those,
So
and whether you think that they could be helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been involved more at a European level with the common micro-credential framework, which is slightly different. But that's been out of the European Association of Distance Teaching Universities, also based in Brussels, is a partner that I work with. And that is to look at micro-credentials within, again, more from a skills and job perspective, definitely from an adult learning perspective. But from the digital competency framework, yeah, absolutely. I think that is important because, again, it goes back down to definitions and understandings. And I think if we have a shared understanding and we have shared language about what the expectation is, about what is a minimum, expectation within a school setting, or where are the boundaries crossed and where's a, non-negotiable boundary that needs to be adhered to, that's where it is important to have these agreed frameworks. Fully agree with that. You have the parents obviously working with their children in a family situation, and then you have the schools, and there needs to be that balance. It needs to be the parameters that are clear, for everyone involved. Yeah, it's a challenging one regardless, and certainly an opportunity to continue to refine. But I think it's important to have those conversations at minimum. Yeah.
Yeah, so on the one hand, we need to have those conversations among adults with the authorities, especially in your respective countries. I mean, do approach your ministries of education, but also the ministry that might be responsible for digitalization. That is surely not the same, yeah, to make them talk to each other so that these things will also fit the educational world. I think that's a very important point, and the European documents can serve as a scaffold actually to support your claims and help you to push certain things through. Yeah, I think that digitalization of schools is unavoidable and needs to be done in a very structured way, and not in this random, okay, we buy all these devices and then do whatever you think is good. So this is something that unfortunately we have seen. Yeah, I see Rui nodding. I know the example in Portugal. I remember that in 2010 we were there. They had bought computers for everybody, and 2 years later they didn't know where they had ended up. So that's not what. Yeah, it was an example for actually how not to do things. So I think that these things need to be really they need to come with a plan, and the European Commission with the Digital Education Action Plan is giving a framework, and they have asked all the countries to come up with a plan. So try to influence those plans. Try to ask your ministry what is in the plan, what is foreseen, how do you plan to involve parents. You will probably get a big oops, parents are not in there, yeah, and try to push your way in there, because it's important. As you need to have the communication with your children at home, I think it's also necessary to have that on the authority level. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on this. Yes, please.
I just want to point that digital competence is one of the 8 lifelong learning skills, right? And we are putting on a pedestal, if I can say that, the digital competence, but we rather have to see the other lifelong learning skills like EntriComp, LifeComp, and involve parents, as you said, Harja, in the management of the projects that we want to think, to structure, and to put on the road. I also was involved on the DCOM framework revision, and this was a great work of many experts, holded by all digital. But I think that we have the digital content, and there's no question that the society today is a digital society, and we are overwhelmed with different skills. Indeed, the government have many digital services that sometimes the older people, they don't have the capacity, or they don't have the financial economic support to achieve those services. And that's why I put here in question, how do we can find a way to use the digital technology to think about online learning, think about how parents can be involved on different projects related with raise their children, to teach their children, but in the science of the community that are involved with those who are vulnerable, but also trying to keep a way to understand where we are left behind. This is my question.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Yes, Claudia, please.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, so first of all, thank you very much, Margaret and Arya. I fully agree on what has been said till now, so no discussion on this. But as a parent or a grandparent, but anyway, still feel to be a parent, I want to share you the perception of two risks that we probably are running since this situation is getting years from such a long period of time. The first one is that, don't you think that we are too much concentrated on the how we are teaching, and question about on what are we teaching, despite of it is blended, mixed, or online, not online, dreaming, sleeping. So I think that we should go back a little bit on the what. Not forgetting the how, but it's more important from my perspective, this one. And this is the first risk. The second one is that I have a very positive approach to life, and I'm sure this COVID will end one day. I'm sure of this. Despite of the fourth wave, fifth wave, there will be many waves, but one day this will be over. And since then, I think that we should start thinking that there is no, life is not done on COVID-centric. We should start in thinking there will be a future. And so instead of doing things only because of COVID, you know, that we go, where do we go on vacation? In Italy? Why? Because of COVID. Why do we do this? Because of COVID. So we need to start, because otherwise, the nice day of the COVID ended will arrive, then we will not know what to say. And then COVID will be over, and we say, and now what do we do that COVID is disappear? Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you
happy
very
to
much.
jump in, Arya.
Yes, for this very positive and very optimistic outlook. Please, Margaret, go ahead.
No, I appreciate your perspective and agree fully. I think the what part, you know, what are we teaching is absolutely fundamental, regardless of COVID. You know, what are we teaching, and how are we giving, regardless of the age, how are we giving a learner, a student, everything they need, and how are we balancing that? It is a fine balance. The how is the pedagogic part, and I do still stand by that intentional design. It is underpinned by a pedagogic approach. You know, what is why, and you know, why do we do this, and where is the value? You know, putting in a series of videos is not great design. And you know, there's certain things that combine together create that design that allows the flow. But it's not, that is when it is online, that is when it is blended, or that is when it is that's regardless of the what, right? So that's it's a separate thing, and we need to do that right. We need to do the how absolutely right, but the what is that content? You know, what is the curriculum? What is the national curriculum? You know, if it's at a country level, what is the national curriculum, and how is that being updated? How is that being questioned? But again, those are bigger, broader questions that need to be in tandem with the governments and with you know, the large entities as well. Certainly locally, there's a lot we can do, but where does the national curriculum sit, and how can we update it so that it's fit for purpose, fit for success, fit for preparing our young people for what is beyond? And it's definitely not only digital literacy. Absolutely agree with that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Margaret, and thank you, Claudia, for this for these 2 points that are very, very valid. I think sometimes we have the impression that the what gets lost on the way. Absolutely, but the what is decisive, because only if I have a what, then the why, the how is worth the while doing. Yeah, if I only do things how and there's no content, then it doesn't make sense at all. Yeah. So the content is definitely very important, and we have to be very careful how to choose that content, because the content has increased enormously over the time, and we need to come to either new priorities about what we are teaching, but we might also have to rethink of how this teaching is designed. As you pointed out, Margaret, this intentional design can give us also the chance of making more connections between different subjects. I think we have taught subjects separately for a long time, and maybe that's not the ideal way to go about it. Yeah? We taught math, and then we taught physics, and we teach English, and we teach history without making any connections. And for many students, that's highly problematic, and they cannot make these connections themselves. So how can we give them the tools to be able to do so? Or how can we teach things in a more transversal way, making them see the connections? So I think these are the big questions that we need to ask ourselves in the future. And I think that digital teaching and learning can be of great help because out there in the digital world, these connections can be made rather easily. Yeah? Maybe more easily than having a math book and having a history book and having a physics book in front of your on your table. But you can find great resources on the internet that actually combine all 3 of them. So maybe that is also one of the opportunities of these things. Yeah, the interdisciplinary study, exactly, than the independent subjects. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Margaret, for being with us today. Thank you to our audience for having been so attentive. I don't know whether there's any last question statement that you would like to make. Otherwise, I would thank you all for attending this webinar. The recording will be made available, I think, sometime next week, if I'm not mistaken, Andrea?
Yes, correct.
Yes, thank you very much. So then you are, we would be happy if you shared the recording also among your networks for everybody who could not be here today. And we're always happy to take questions also afterwards by email. And we will certainly all keep in touch. And I really, really hope that we can meet in Lyon in France in June 2022. And please stay tuned for our Multiply event in Brussels at the end of January for the Media Literacy Project. And we will certainly also have more webinars coming up during this year. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.